So I woke up this morning thinking that I would like to do a wee informal talk about narcissism. Now, I don't intend to be an expert in anything whatsoever apart from my own life. And that's actually quite a fitting statement, really, for the topic of narcissism, because that is exactly what narcissists try and take from you. Your own narrative and your own lived experiences. The narcissist will appropriate those experiences that you have had, and by their almighty deranged sense of entitlement that God knows where it's come from in them, but that's a hallmark of the narcissist, as they seem to have acquired or purposefully cultivated this humongous sense of entitlement to other people's stories, lived experiences and narratives, and for their own selfish purposes, whether that's to advance themselves in a career or to advance themselves in the eyes of others, even on social media or just in their life, to put themselves at the centre of their little universe. Because actually what you'll find is that the world view and the world experience of a true proper narcissist is very, very limited and small. And I don't mean, they've not left the country in that sense. No, I mean emotionally and psychologically, their world, by the very nature of their narcissism and their narcissistic control, they self-create a very limited existence, in the sense that they'll only surround themselves with yes people and adoring people and people that don't challenge them. And anybody that comes into that world that they have self-created and self-perpetuated, probably for years, in fact, they will seek to exclude anybody that challenges their little protective world. And it's not protective in a good sense, in the sense that, of course we all want to protect what we hold dear, what we love, what we cherish, what we value. We all want to protect that. It's a natural part of being human. But rather, the narcissist seeks to protect that which enables their gain at another's expense. So whether that's spinning lies about another person, which actually is probably the most common tool that they have and they use. They'll try and discredit you if you're at the brunt end of their concealed wrath. And it's all very self-serving and self-seeking for them, because essentially at the core of a narcissist's life is themselves. They might be married. I mean, many of them are in marriages or long-term relationships. In fact, this all helps them. They've probably had a very fulfilling career. Well, when I say fulfilling, they're probably not fulfilled, but they've probably had a long established career. Maybe not, but what I'm trying to say is that, they're not sitting in their bedroom rolled up into the fetal position and wearing a white coat. They're just somebody that you're working with, somebody in your family even, one of your friends. But they all have the same intention, which is for them to be the star of the show that they create. And anybody or anything coming into that doesn't facilitate them being the star is going to be swiftly dealt with, and the situation will be manipulated in order to discredit that person who doesn't uphold their own personal narrative about themselves and who doesn't facilitate them being the star of their own show. And more generally, these talks are not, as I've said, from an expert position in any way. I do come from a Christian perspective. That's only because of my own profound Christian experiences and beliefs. Things that have happened to me, things that I've experienced. And I'll never ever be one of the multitude of people, it would seem, in this planet today that mention other people's names and, they bring their dirty laundry into the open on their social media, whether that's Instagram, a TikTok, I don't know, even on YouTube I'm guessing, but what I mean is anything that I share in these informal discussions or talks is only ever going to be from my own experience or from what I know just from life, either from my own experiences as a well-read, educated person, or from my own experiences of life. But I will never use it to personally identify any one specific individual, because I am essentially the most private person I know on the planet at this time. everybody else seems to want to be out there sharing the minutiae of their private lived lives. And I've just never been like that. I've never had a Facebook account. I don't have any social media. I think I was on X for a time and that. I mean, I got absolutely nothing from that. I just put on some piano tunes, the same ones I've got on YouTube. So this is essentially the only social media I have, and I'm not interested in engaging with nonsense. I would rather put content out there, because it is a part of life in the modern world. But I'd rather put content out there that actually serves to help people in some way. Now, getting back to the topic of narcissism, the narcissist doesn't do that. Well, correction. The narcissist may well, very often, exhibit the propensity and appear as if, and actually act and behave practically as if they want to help people. But it's the motivation that differs. Their motivation will 9 times out of 10 not be genuinely from a place of goodness, just doing something genuinely to help. No, most of the things that they do that seem on the surface level to be helpful to another human, most of what that is for the narcissist is self-serving. So essentially, on a surface level, they may not appear to be acting differently or to respond differently to a difficult situation as somebody with genuine empathy and concern, but the narcissist's motives are different because it's all about them. Of course, this is not evident from the outside surface level, but this is designed, as I say, nothing expert in this at all. It's how the narcissistic personality has affected me in real terms. But not just me, because I know a lot of people have experienced and still experience the effects of a narcissistic person. And honestly, it can be so traumatic and devastating. It can cause lasting legacy of bitterness, anger, resentment. If a narcissist has really worked their poison in your mind and in your life, you can lack self-esteem. You can actually believe their manipulative lies about yourself, and that can affect your mental health. It can make you blame yourself for situations that were completely out of your control. Yet the narcissist has that and has honed that ability to make it a you problem, because of course they're deflecting from themselves. And actually behind that behaviour is the cold, hard fact that a real narcissist, and you know if a narcissist has been operating in your life, in your family, in your work, wherever, you know, because you will feel that. You know. So there seems to be a never-ending supply of articles on narcissism these days. I don't know why, if rather it's, the progressing march of social media that has driven this need to understand narcissism and what's going on behind it. But I think almost every day now, as I said earlier, I don't do social media apart from YouTube. So I'm not going to be scrolling through Insta or any other platform. However, I do read a lot of online news, and in that I keep up to date with all the social media frenzy, the latest controversy. And I know that almost every other day I'm reading some kind of article on narcissism and the narcissistic personality. And it always seems to be written by some kind of psychologist or psychiatrist who's got a PhD in this and a PhD in that. And yes, I do have a PhD, but I don't use it to write about expert topics or to promote myself or call myself an expert. No, I just use it to metaphorically slap people in the face when they're trying to make me feel like a nobody. But all these expert articles, all they want to do is kind of give you this textbook interpretation of narcissism. They'll break it down in the article to all the different so-called types of narcissism, narcissistic personality. You've got the classic narcissist, or you've got the, I don't absorb this kind of detail, but you'll know what I'm talking about if you've read these types of articles. But this is just coming from my experience, and from my experiences, not just from a personal point of view, but of course, what is the Christian perspective in all of this? Well, I think it's like anything, any type of abuse, because let's face it, the real effect of how a true narcissist operates is abusive towards other people. Let's not cherry coat it and see it through rose-tinted glasses just because they may well be successful in life. Yeah, at what expense? Who else have they trashed along the way to get there? Who else have they minimised? Who else have they spun lies about to get there and to to be in this position where they look so great and they've got all this social status and they're surrounded by 100 adoring friends and probably family. But at what expense? And if you have experienced this firsthand, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that's possibly where the modern obsession with narcissism and social media comes in, because I think there's actually a false sense that just because somebody is putting themselves out there on social media and seems to be all about me, that automatically makes them a narcissist. Well, no, it doesn't. It's far more cold and calculated than that. And actually, the worst narcissists are not going to be posting some daft picture of them sitting in the latest high fashion bikini or with the latest £10,000 handbag. They might be, but it's more than likely that the worst narcissists are among us. They're one of your friends, as I've said. They're in your family, and you're seeing them, if not every day, once a week when you go round to visit somebody. They're sat at the table, and you just get that dread. That it's almost like an anxiety that it's like a darkness, and you're just like, oh no. You never vocalise these things though, do you? It's just that instinctive feeling, that inner sigh, that drop in the stomach, perhaps, if it's really bad. You might actually physically feel that, in your gut, because our guts are very, very intelligent and switched on. You should listen to that gut sensation or instinct. We've often heard that term, gut feeling. It's been around, God, for decades and decades. There's nothing truer than listening to your gut. I've probably been guilty of not doing that, because in today's world there's so many other distractions. But essentially, if you felt that stomach drop or just that, you've walked into a room and that person has been there, you'll know what I mean. And so, I know I've said that this is from a Christian perspective, but it's a huge topic actually, because it's not just about that narcissistic personality and how they've weaved their narrative about you and manipulated other people, and that same narrative is not just about their behaviours and the effect they've had, it's also about that effect on you, what that's done to your self-esteem, how that's impacted your view of yourself. Because as I started this talk, what the narcissist is coming to do to anybody that opposes their own self-perpetuating, self-created world, their own little society, their own little social network, what they want to do is get rid of anybody who's going to challenge that wee social network that they've got, or that wee world narrative that they've created. And if you don't fit their little box and you don't become one of the yes people, then we all know that they're going to want to eject you from that narrative, but they'll do so in a way that will spin it. Now, I'm not talking about your average ordinary situation. Everybody's got the right to choose who they do and don't have in their lives, who they choose to socialise with and all that. I'm not talking about that kind of normal everyday thing, or even more serious situations where perhaps you've had a friendship that's gone on for years, but then doubt or even been in a relationship, but then you realise, well, this is not working for whatever reasons, and blah blah blah. Things change normally within human relationships, even within family relationships. There's normal changes that occur. People change, they move on. Life stages come and go. People are at all different stages of life. Some have families, some don't, etc. So there's always going to be that natural evolution of relationships as you go through life. That's not what I'm talking about here. That kind of natural evolution can be devastating in itself, but what I'm referring to here is a particular circumstance or narrative about you that has been created and perpetuated by a narcissistic person in your life, who's wanted to have that control over your life, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically. They have probably perpetuated false narratives about you in order to influence how other people see you. It's a form of bullying and control. And that's what I'm talking about. Not just the natural evolution of changing relationships through the months or years or even weeks, perhaps. And as I said, if you've been at the forefront or even the back foot of somebody with these tendencies, especially if it's somebody who is deemed close, family member, long-term friend, somebody you trust, then the personal effects on you of that behaviour can be devastating. And as I mentioned earlier, can have terrible mental health effects on the person who's at the brunt of that. Because ultimately what you need to understand, and I will come on to the Christian perspective, but I think with this being such a huge and difficult topic, there's so much to unpack. But I think essentially what you need to understand is that the narcissist is looking to control their own worldview and their own narrative. And when I say worldview, I don't mean what they think about what's going on in Ukraine or Russia, or what they think about British politics. I'm talking about, and I'm alluding back to that little small universe that they've created for themselves, a little social circle they've got of their family and friends that are always going to consist of yes people, because no people they don't want. No people are an inconvenience. No people are a problem that they need to manage. Whereas healthy, psychologically healthy, functioning, fully fledged human adults will tend to accept no people as, okay, either live and let live, you're absolutely entitled to how you feel, you are absolutely entitled to your completely opposite opinion, and a healthy functioning adult will accept other people's different lived experiences, other people's different interpretations of what is true, what is the correct narrative. They will accept that. But the narcissist will not. They will manipulate people and situations so that your experience in your narrative, in your actual life, is dictated to by them. And this is how you will know and eventually realise the narcissist is at work in your life. And do you know what? You might have been subject to this kind of treatment for years without even realising it. And maybe some particular event has occurred that's just been like the end of the bridge, and you've opened your eyes and you've said, wait a minute, or maybe you've heard something this person said about you at work, or I'm not making it about anything personal in that sense, at, the local gym or your local, crochet or martial arts club, I don't know. And so maybe you've heard something and you're like, wow. Or they've sent you a text or a message, an email or something, and you're like, what? Is that what you really believe about me? You're trying to tell me that was my experience. That was how I thought. That was how I felt. Wait a minute. It's not your place to tell me what my lived experience was. No. Because a healthy, functioning adult would understand that, that wouldn't even enter their mind to try and tell another person what their own experience had been. And I'm not talking about like going to see a counsellor or something and them try to help you understand your thoughts and feelings or your actions or your behaviour. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about with the narcissist is they will try and manipulate your own lived experiences. So, for example, I had somebody tell me that I was never close to my family. And I thought to myself, this was through a very, very distressing, disturbing event that had happened to somebody very close to me. And the other person was involved in that. And this other person has been a narcissist for, to be honest, when I think about it, probably as long as I can ever remember, or certainly through most of their adulthood and time that I've known them. And they tried to respin the entire narrative of my life in one text message. And it was like, how dare you try and control my narrative? And you know what, look, I'm just going to use this as a kind of signpost of the modern day situation where this could occur as a kind of explanatory example. Now, I do not care in the slightest what goes on between Rebecca Vardy and the other one, what's her name? Colleen Rooney. Sorry. I could not care in the slightest. However, the Vardy documentary is all over TV, and also Vardy, the footballing side of things for him is on the Netflix. So I've been watching bits of that. And I'm aware of the statement that Rebecca Vardy put out, because she's been criticised a lot for her documentary. It's all about, oh, this is boring, and, you know, nobody's very impressed. Probably because they just come across as being really normal. But I'm not going to get into my opinions on that. There's no much drama, let's put it that way, in the documentary. She just seems very calm, quite normal compared to some of them. Anyway, so she's put out a statement on, of course, her social media, whatever that is, saying that she's taken back control of her own narrative, because for all this time, you know, all these years, other people have been taking her own narrative and spinning it, basically. And she's taken that control back. And I don't know anything about these two women personally, of course. I couldn't care less about their court case, libel case, whatever it was. They're wags at the end of the day. I don't have any affiliation with them whatsoever. But I respect that, for her to have put that out there, because it shows somebody who is concerned about her own narrative and the truth. Now, people will argue, well, it's not the truth, that's just what... Well, it doesn't matter. The fact is, she is saying that she feels her own narrative has been stolen, essentially. And, of course, the other person would probably argue the same thing. And this, I feel, is unusually probably going to lead me on to, you know, the Christian perspective on all of this. Because at the end of the day, essentially, and I don't know how I can easily make a jump from talking about two wags to the gospel, but there you go. Essentially, at the heart of the Bible is not only the fight between good and evil, but it's the fight between truth and lies. And essentially, that is what is at the core of the true narcissist. They're peddling lies. It's really not that complex at the end of the day. If you're at the back end or front end of this kind of treatment, you'll know what I mean. They're spinning lies about you and your life. And they're trying to make themselves look better in the process, because that is their motivation. And they're trying to protect their little small social circle of friends and family, because they want to always be the start of the show, and anybody and anything that comes to threaten that, they're going to try and demonise and minimise. So that is essentially the difference between truth and lies. The truth of your own lived experience, and the lies that they're trying to use to manipulate that, mainly for other people, because to be honest with you, the narcissist does not care about you. They always do everything for their own benefit. So any lies they're telling about you, or any false narrative they're spinning about you, is to help them, to make them look better in front of their friends and their family. They don't want you in their circle. And by the way, you do not want to be in that circle either, because they will do that to your face until they've got what they want, which is you as a no person, as a non-A liquor, I did say it. Out of their little locus of control, shall we say. They don't want to hear your dissenting voice. They don't want to hear your side of things. They don't want to even know that you exist. So they will continue and they will continue and they will continue until they've either broken you and they can control you emotionally, or just until you're completely out of their life, which, by the way, don't think that that's a bad thing. Don't try and hang on to that kind of situation, because at the end of the day, it's far more within your interests to, you actually do not want this person in your life. And if you're kind of still stuck in that mind frame where you want that person in your life and you're really sad that they, they've done this, and you need to start thinking differently. Because ultimately, that is keeping you trapped in a toxic, unhealthy situation. You need to start claiming back your own truth. Dare I say it? Just like the wag? No, I don't. No, it just doesn't sound right, does it? But the point being that you need to realise this person should not and cannot have control over your life, over your narrative, over your experiences, over your relationships. The narcissist will even try and tell you, what is going on with your relationships. They will minimise everything in your life. They will minimise the people in your life. If you've got a spouse, they will likely minimise that person unless they might take a different tact. If that person's a yes person to them, of course, they will then try and build a bridge between you and that person. Not a bridge, rather. They will try and build a wall, between you and that yes person. And unfortunately, that must be a hellish situation if you're in that. Thankfully, I would never, ever have been in a situation to that extent where, I had another yes person in my life backing up the narcissist. No, I would never tolerate that. But at the end of the day, to come back to the core of the lie against the truth of your position, and the lie, insidious lies of the narcissist and their false interpretation of your lived experiences in your relationships, in your life, for their gain, to make them the star of the show. Now, the Bible and Christianity is essentially the fight between truth and lies. The devil is the father of lies, and Lord Jesus in the Bible refers to him as such. He's the father of lies. He's a murderer. This is the words of Jesus in the Bible. And St. Paul, he has no truth in him. That's what they say about the enemy. And it's true. Jesus, on the other hand, is the way, the truth, and the life. I think that's quoted in John, the Gospel. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Whereas the devil is the opposite. He was once a magnificent angel who was called Lucifer, son of the morning star. And he rebelled against God in the heavenly realms. He wanted to be like God. Essentially, he was jealous of God. He was jealous of God's power. He was jealous of God's authority. And he wanted that for himself. So he stirred up all this opposition. He was an angel. He was one of the top angels. He was a fantastic musician. Yeah, in heaven, where they played musical instruments. They still do. But before the fall of man, this was how it all transpired before we get to the Garden of Eden. In the spiritual realm, this was what was going on. And it's all laid out in the book of Isaiah in the Bible. And further through into the New Testament, but primarily the prophetic teachings of the prophet Isaiah laid out what was going on in the heavenly realms that led to the physical destruction and sin entering the world at the human level. So in the heavenly realms, there was Lucifer up there playing his harp or whatever, or the lute, or whatever fine instrument he was a master of. But within his heart as an angel, within his spirit being, as an angel in heaven, there was resentment, there was anger, there was jealousy, there was all the bad things building up against God, the Eternal One, the I am who I am. And so he stirred up a lot of opposition because he wanted to be like God. And the Bible actually tells us he wanted to take God's throne. He wanted to usurp God. And the thing that baffles me, and always has baffled me about that, is how did he think that he could? Because God cannot be moved. God cannot be usurped. Nobody can obliterate God, despite the fact that multiple so-called experts and professionals have written books about the deaths of God and God being annihilated and God is annihilated. What tosh? What absolute nonsense. How do they know? Are they in personal communication with God? Well, no. They don't even admit he exists. They deny his existence. So how on earth would they know that something, that God has died, if they don't even acknowledge God's existence in the first place? But I digress. So essentially, here is this son of the morning star, the angel in heaven, the great Lucifer. Oh, this resentment building up. God knows what kind of time frame we're talking about, because the heavenly realms don't exist in the same time frames as we do in this earthly realm. And then one day it comes to a head. Now the Bible doesn't go into exactly what happened. I mean, nobody knows. This was just a vision that was given to the prophet Isaiah, which we can read about. Essentially, he must have tried to just go beyond what God was prepared to accept. Because the thing is, people say, well, how could he have done that though? If he was an angel, why would he have rebelled against God? Why would he have wanted to rebel against God? Oh, people forget the basic tenets of Christianity these days. You know, the kerfuffle about misinterpretations and modern churches not even reading the Bible these days, just going into their own narratives and their own spiels about what they think about this and what they think about that. Your modern day pastor of a mega church, I'm not saying all of them, very many of them are more likely to be standing there giving their own opinions, their own personal narratives, than actually basing it on the biblical truth. You'll see them, they'll be up there ranting and raving and call it preaching. And they're just spouting their own thoughts, their own opinions about things. I would argue it's not ideal for a preacher of the gospel, as they self-proclaim to be. However, I digress yet again. But the point is that God gives every human being and every being that he's created on the earth, which includes the angels, not on the earth, rather in his universe, in the heavenly realm, in the physical realm of the earth, he gives to each and every one of us something called free will. That's what Adam and Eve had. Yet that free will, because of the treachery of Lucifer in heaven as an angel, that free will now comes with temptation and the choice to rebel against God and do your own thing and go your own way and leave God and the Holy Spirit behind. So to finish the heavenly story, Lucifer then, because God didn't want him anymore, and he told him, I'm going to kick you out. You're not welcome here. And essentially he was kicked out of heaven and forbidden from the heavenly realm where God lived and God existed as spirit. He was put into the earthly realm of the earth, where Adam and Eve, in the physical manifestation of the human entity and being, were then led to rebel against God, in the well-known story of the snake in the Garden of Eden. And when Lucifer fell to the earth, he then became Satan because he changed. Of course, we all know the earth changed. It lost its heavenly blessing. It died and withered to some extent. And God had to bring it back. We know in the flood and all that. Revive the plants and the trees, because it had all died. And when Lucifer was kicked out of heaven for his treachery and wanting to steal God's throne, he became Satan. But he also he started up dissension in the heavenly realm, and he actually managed to get the support of a third of God's angels who decided to go to earth with him. And then they all became demonic entities, because, as I say, when they fell from the blessed heavenly realms and they went to the earthly realms, which had been forsaken, or they had been forsaken from heaven, when they were expelled to the earth, they weren't in their heavenly form. Lucifer was no longer a great angel, a great musician. He was Satan. He was the evil one, and he took on that form, as did the third of the angels that were sent with him. He took on the evil form of Satan, who he had become. And that's where we get the idea, the knowledge of a demonic entity is those other angels that followed Satan to the earth, who willingly followed Satan to the earth to inhabit human population. So don't ever look on the Bible as just, I've not made all this up, you know. This is all biblical narrative. Of course, whether you choose to believe it or not, you could think of some crazy person who's posting weird stuff and weird talks. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there who would think that, who completely oppose these spiritual beliefs. But I don't care, because that's not what this is about. I'm telling you the biblical narrative, whether that's something you choose to agree with. But the reason I'm bringing this in, I'm infusing these talks with the Christian perspective, is because you need to understand the core of what's behind what's going on in your life and in the world today. So what I'm trying to explain is, unless you understand the origins of the spiritual realm versus the earthly realm, and how that battle between good and evil, between spirit and carnality, between God and the devil, is still raging as we continue to inhabit this earthly existence. I believe outright there's a spirit world, there's a spirit realm. You may not, that's absolutely fine. You may just be a materialist or an atheist. I'm not here to defend my beliefs. I believe what I believe. You believe what you believe. It's not about that. It's about me trying to explain from the Christian perspective, or one Christian's perspective, how that's such of a modern day topic of the narcissist and the damaging effects it can have in another person's life. How behind the scenes of that is a spiritual battle between truth and falsehood. And you might be caught up in something like this and you have no spiritual awareness whatsoever. Maybe you choose, you just don't believe in anything remotely connected to anything that I've been alluding to or speaking about in terms of Bible prophecy, how the evolution of the spiritual world impacted the earth in the material sense. Well, if you're caught up in something where there's narcissistic control over your life, you've experienced the damaging effects it has in your inner feelings of self-esteem. As I said much earlier on, you might even challenge yourself in your own narrative. Is that what my life was like? Or it might cause you confusion about your own lived experiences. It might cause you depression. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying that if you have experienced that head on, you might still be going through that control by that narcissistic person and spinning their lies, making you feel like you have to fit their narrative or else they invalidate everything about you and your life. Oh, I would simply say, I just don't believe that all that can purely be explained from a materialistic, and when I say materialistic, I mean the material world point of view. It's always the Christian perspective. Now, if any Christian tells you that the devil doesn't exist and there's no spirit world, that Christian is a liar and you should not listen to them. You cannot be a Christian and not believe in the spirit. I mean, it's just impossible. Jesus Christ himself died and rose again in spirit, Holy Spirit. All through the Bible, he took control over dark entities and dealt with them exactly as he did on the cross, but that's for another talk. So you need to understand that when something is a negative spiritual experience, that will affect your self-esteem, that will affect your mental health. And if you can think that you can overcome the effects of that damaging dark spiritual work, then you can actually start to use tangible mechanisms to overcome that in your own mind, heart and soul. You can start to realise this is a false narrative. You can start to steal that narrative back from the narcissist. You're in control, not them. Let them spin away to their heart's content, because genuinely it's better for you that they're not in your life. Let them go on with it. If you need to challenge. Absolutely. Never not challenge out of fear, but if it's appropriate, absolutely challenge. If it's to set things right, if it's to help in that process of regaining control back over your own narrative. But don't be afraid to no longer be part of that person's life, because ultimately it will just cause you ongoing suffering. I've had somebody in my life trying to portray me as some kind of money grabbing thief, basically. I'm not going into personal details because that would give it away, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, a lot of times what the narcissist does is actually project their own incompetencies onto other people. That's the whole other thing that they'll do. They'll use that as a tool or a weapon, projecting their own personality faults and incompetencies onto other people. Again, it's a way of them deflecting from their real motivations. I've been portrayed by this person as just having been a nobody, basically, all through my teenage years. All the things I've experienced being quite traumatic and horrific, to be honest, being completely invalidated and minimised by this person because they always wanted to be the star of the show. Do you know what? I just let them go on with it for years and years and years. Because what does it matter to me for a liar to spin a narrative? I know the truth. And if you're confident in your truth, you've got nothing to prove to anybody. It's the people that matter to you. The people that matter in your life and in your experiences are going to show up for you. That might be one person in 10 years. It doesn't matter. And it's certainly not quantity, but it's definitely quality. And if you're only one person listening to this and I've helped you in some small, tiny, tiny way, think, do you know what? She's right. I have been manipulated. I have been controlled. This person's been doing this for ages. I'm just starting to realise that, do you know what? If you're that one person, and I hope you are, then that is amazing to me. That is the whole point in this. I don't care about quantity. That's why I'm not doing this. For myself, to become famous or any of that nonsense on social media. I tell you, I'll wrap this up, and I might bring part 2 back to this because it's such a huge topic. And I know people don't like to listen to things for too long. I'm glad if you got past the first minute, to be honest. But there's a story. Many Christians will be familiar with this. But actually, it's for everybody. So, 2 people are walking along the beach. A man and a young boy, say. Walking along the beach, and there's all these starfish that have washed up on the shore. And the wee boy's running excitedly along the beach. He's going, look at all these starfish. They're all dying. And he starts to pick up each of the starfish. And he throws them back into the sea. Now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of these wee starfish. Yet here we are, the wee boy, running along the beach, excitedly picking them up, chucking them back in the water. And here's the older man looking at this wee boy and thinking, oi, what are you doing? You're wasting your time there, pal. The wee boy looks up at the guy and he says, huh? Like that, screws his wee face up, goes like that. Ooh. The guy goes, there's hundreds of these things. It's going to make absolutely no difference what you are doing. And then the wee boy, in the magnificent, majestic naivety of wisdom that little children only can possess, he picks up one of the wee starfish and he chucks it into the water. And he says to the old guy, he says, well, it made a difference to that one, pal.